Jim, you mentioned the speed with which change has been able to be made. Things that would have taken years, you were able to do literally overnight. And that leads me to my next question, which it hopefully has a more positive opportunity for you guys to think more positively about the future, which is changes that you've had to make that you think will be permanent. And some of those that you think might be actual improvements that this has kind of pushed you to make. And then maybe also some permanent or long-term changes that you're not so happy about, but that you think will survive beyond this.
Well, it's a great question. And I think we can quickly point to some areas, to your point about what we hope will stay with us. We've all built muscle strength around working remotely, using technology, Zoom, go to meetings, whatever it is, to really convey and communicate when needed and where needed. And I think the plus there, we have a huge field team at the national organization that travels a great deal. So we hope to be able to actually expand bandwidth by less travel and time spent there and using it focused and the tools that we've been able to put in place, and certainly the muscle strength around how to use them would be one benefit. I think the second one is what we've all talked about already is the level of virtual and remote programming and experiences. I don't know that it'll ever take the full place of a in-person or on the ground experience, but it certainly will be the opportunity to augment, supplement, and add to whatever that looks like. And I think the trick there will be how to measure impact as we go through this. But we see that as something that's been fast-tracked and accelerated, and we're going to add to it as we go forward. I think the third advantage or plus here is despite what we may think in terms of connectivity and being remote, that we wouldn't be as together as a team or teams or an organization, we found that we're actually spending a lot more time together and interacting. And I think that's been really valuable from a team building standpoint, at the senior level, but all the way through our organization, different teams. They're just interacting much more. So the level of collaboration, the level of trust, the level of actual productivity has risen dramatically. And I hope we keep that. I think a couple things that, I would say that to your second half of the question, not looking forward to, or maybe not continuing here, is really, there's also a lot more time being invested in multiple communications, whereas before, perhaps you would get that done in one meeting, or you could just get people together much quicker. Certainly the airwaves and the traffic is jammed up in terms of communication, and it's very scheduled, which is fine, but it also creates some boundaries that are difficult to get over as we look at going back to, or going to this new abnormal, as you called it. So I think that's going to be one thing that I hope we can move a little bit quicker, move out of this so that we can communicate in some other ways as we go forward. Obviously, the economics and the impact there is something that I don't look forward to, and I don't think it's just this year. I think that goes into next year and perhaps beyond. And I used the words earlier about the level of devastation or destruction that's taken place in just a couple months. I hope that doesn't continue, and I do think it's going to take a while to rebuild. And there's an emotional toll and a psychological toll on staff, families, kids, and communities that we are going to have to deal with and support and resource beyond what we would have imagined in other situations. So I see those as some of the things that are going to be with us that aren't so great coming out of this.
Yeah, thank you. Jennifer, what do you think? What changes are going to stick for the better?
Yeah, I love this question. You made me think with this one. And I think you've asked it in both ways, and I think it is a dual-edged, it's dual-edged. In the positive side, Like Jim, I think we already had 25% of our national workforce was remote, but we've learned new skills and more efficiency, and I think that will stick with us, and that will allow us to do more into the future. I think for us, we are working on what the research base looks like to do online positive youth development at greater scale and longer. I think 4-H is forever changed. We will never, ever again be only in person. This has been too positive of new reach of families that we've reached before. We have increasing enrollment in 4-H in this time. So we are figuring out what that looks like and building the research base for that right now, preparing to put out a white paper soon on what we know and what we still need to learn. So I think those are for us, it's helped us realize all those things that everyone said, we can't do it that way. We had to do it, and we had to do it fast, and it's been very impressive, and we're going to keep that. That's a pretty universal across the board feeling of the leadership of local 4-H leaders and educators. On the negative side, I think the biggest impact will be, I certainly agree with Jim on the economically. It's serious, and this is multi-year. We see it for our organization as multi-year, at least 2 to 3 to recover from the losses. But I think the bigger loss that we all worry about is the lasting impact on our young people, both their learning loss that is not, we can't even quantify it today. The learning loss that's happened. Stephanie talked about those youth without devices. I think there are significantly more than any of us realize of kids that had no school since mid-March, 0, and they're going to have no camp this summer, and they may have half-time school next year. That is could be a year of learning loss, and for many of our kids that are already behind, this is serious. And we don't even know how to research it yet because we can't get to the kids and understand it totally. And no one's really counting those device situations. It's serious. And what I learned too is our folks in 4-H said, well, while the schools were giving them devices, we could reach them, but now the schools are taking them back for the summer, and now we can't reach the kids anymore. So it's that sort of logic is really frustrating. So what I would share is I think the learning loss is unquantified at this point and needs to be quantified and addressed. The second is, and probably what I'm worried even more about, is the mental health impact on our young people. We just we had a mental health survey for teens in the field. I just got the early returns last night, and it's very scary. 80% of the teens in our survey said mental health is a significant issue for young people in the US, and 2/3 think that COVID-19 will have a lasting impact on their generation's physical health. They're more confident in their physical health than their mental health right now. And 3 times, they told us I think it was the report that they're 3 times more likely to feel peer pressure to hide their feelings than to drink or do drugs or do all those other risky behaviors. They're more likely to hide their feelings. So we're just getting a handle on some of these youth insights, but I think that's what I think is the permanent, what I hope isn't permanent, but the long-lasting potential, long tail of this is in the mental health arena, and I think it's going to be something that all of us are going to step up to. I know we all will be committed to that, the social emotional recovery of our nation's young people.
Thanks. And Stephanie, what are some of the permanent changes you're seeing for better or for worse?
I would really echo, I mean, I won't repeat everything that Jim and Jennifer said that resonates for us too. I think to add a little color to that, and maybe from a little bit of a different angle, I think certainly the focus of our organizations is really the young people, but we are dealing with the adults in ways that we weren't before. There's a lot more time spent among our affiliates talking to parents who are trying to manage in this situation, and we don't have the resources really to do that, but we have to do that. So we will make that happen somehow, but that takes a toll on facilitators. Another sort of nuance is that for our facilitators to reach the girls, we had to, in many cases, supply devices to them because they come from these communities. They don't have a device either. So while it's true that schools are taking back devices and we're losing contact with the girls, it took us a while to get our facilitators to have something that they could use to contact the girls. So the communities that serve these people are pulling together all their people and all their resources. I think there's a big question about whether funders really understand that and whether funders will come along with us and be flexible. And there's all this trust-based philanthropy is a big conversation, but I don't know that in all cases that trust is built in a way that is really resilient. And there's a conversation about wanting to fund leaders of organizations who are Black or female, but it doesn't really play out in actual philanthropy being sort of dedicated to those directions. It really still is along the lines of, I know a guy who knows a guy and he's on the board with me at the symphony. And, so those are the networks that are really supporting these things. And there needs to be more understanding from a ground level of what it looks like to try to do this work so that they really will understand how to let us decide how to allocate the resources to the people who are doing this work. It's not going to look like it used to look. I think that's part of this, so-called new normal. It can't look the way it does. We can still account for it. We can still have data. We can still have outcomes. We can still be trusted to run programs effectively and efficiently, but it's not going to look all sort of organized and neat the way it used to. I think another really big lasting change for us is going to come. Jennifer used the word recovery, and I think some people have lost faith in the notion that we ever really will recover from this. I think the young people, I personally think that they're right. There's a lot of people running around lately, and to answer your earlier question, David, about the George Floyd situation and all the other murders that have happened, a lot of people are shocked and outraged. A lot of people are numb. There's a lot of different reaction, but nobody rational thinks that there's going to be a moment that the sun breaks out from behind the clouds and we are recovered from this situation. We will never forget what it felt like to have such a bad medical situation in the country or in the world that everybody had to stay home. Nobody ever could conceive of this because 1918 was a long time ago. Last time it happened, we didn't know what the rest of the world was doing quite as easily as we do now. Everybody on the planet pretty much got shot down by this thing that will affect this generation forever and ever. But at the same time, the whole globe seems to be reacting also to the perception that all of a sudden America has a really bad racial injustice problem. Right? Some of us could probably tell you it's been going on for a while. It reaches moments at certain moments, but I've already lived through quite a few moments like this where people said, this is the moment, this is a moment. And young people, this is their first one of those moments, but the second moment feels different from the first moment, and that too has an impact on your mental health, and it has an impact on your optimism and your ability to move forward, and in your faith in the systems that support you. So for us to attract young people to our programming, I think we need to have credibility. And there's a big credibility gap right now between people on the planet. I mean, it's hard to really express the level of lack of confidence. And just within my staff who come from all different walks of life, people don't trust each other to understand how they feel. People don't trust each other with their future because they are all of a sudden realizing there are some pretty bad people. And I didn't know that they were there, and I don't know who they all are at this point. And so that's like COVID in some way, that, you don't know who it is who's going to do the thing to you that you don't want done to you. It could be somebody at the grocery store. It could be somebody that, on your block. It could be somebody that you didn't realize was infected with COVID or racism. And it almost feels the same, that it's killing us and we can't stand it anymore. And so there's that, and trying to work with young people in an environment where the adults really need a lot of help, and trying to focus on the work that we do for the young people. And they're saying, no, we need to just shut the doors and focus on this. I don't think that's going to go away this summer or this fall either. And that too is a major resource need that is almost like the mental health and the trauma and the learning loss. I mean, we've had a major setback. And every time there's a big storm, like a hurricane, I had an affiliate lose its center in the last tornado that happened. That too is a kind of setback that we can't predict. So I think we have to sort of soldier on through all kinds of these things and find resiliency and stability and all kinds of things. It's nice to be in this conversation with these two colleagues, because coming last to the group of leaders of these organizations, I have found a lot of support just in being able to talk to people like me about these things. Even though we all have had a different relationship to the history of racism, looking at us on this call, we all know that we're trying to work with the same populations of people, the same families, the same socioeconomic brackets. We all are trying to do the right thing without being able to, hold on, the shifting sands of this. It's really hard to know what is the right thing today and how best can we do it.
Thank you. My last question is about the impact on the kids. We've been talking about the organizations and what you're all doing. And, when I think about the adults, as I think Stephanie said, we've all lived through multiple convulsions of various kinds, nothing like COVID, I think, in any of our lifetime, but certainly the George Floyd murder, we've seen this movie before, and too many times. But for the kids, I think it was really poignant that you pointed out that for many kids, this may be their first experience. You're just coming of age and awareness. And it happens at a time when you don't have school, when you're locked out from seeing your friends, when your parents have lost their jobs, when, everything seems to be conspiring against you. And Jennifer referred to, the mental health status of kids. And I'd just like you all to reflect for a moment on what you think the impact is going to be, health, mental health, and opportunities on our young people. I know just something that was smaller than this, the Great Recession a decade ago, studies show that kids who graduated from high school or college during that time have never caught up to where they would have been if that hadn't happened. And that was a blip compared to where we're at now. So maybe Jennifer, since you commented first on the study you've done of mental health attitudes among kids, do you have any thoughts about where this is going to leave kids and what we all can do as adults for them?
Right. I'm glad to address this. Of course, I don't have a crystal ball, but it's really obvious to me. We also have a Young Alumni Advisory Committee of 4-H young alums who are 18 to 26. And they are the best and brightest. And I've met with them 2 or 3 times since the COVID shutdowns. And we have a donor who sponsors them. And we've seen over that time, these are the ones who are achievers. They are going places. I've seen them just be down. This is very serious to them. They remind me that I was 3 years old. They were 3 years old when 9/11 happened. So this is the first thing they weren't of age to know what was going on. This is the first big thing that's happened, and it's so big and widespread. And adding on to it, the racial unrest, the acknowledgement of racism in our country, the divide that's creating, it's more serious, I think, than they're letting on. I will say that. That's from what I can tell with the youth that we talk to. We've been working on these insights from them, but it's serious. Where I see the promise and is in, at least in the 4-H program, one of the important things we build is a civic engagement ethos, a commitment to others, a commitment to my community and to serving others. And I will tell you, we've seen that go out the roof. Our young people, while they've been home, there's so many needs focused, around them, we've seen them pivoting and just create in amazing ways. We have groups, creating thousands of face shields from 3D printers, creating thousands of masks for all the frontline workers. The list goes on and on. So I will tell you, I see that as one of the things we will continue to support them and tell their story about, because I see a very bright future of what this generation, where they will lead us with their values. And I think for us as adults to keep encouraging them with the values they have around the climate, around equality, that's a country I want to live in, and I want to support them with that.
Thank you. Stephanie, anything more you could add?
I echo that. I think another thing I would say is that in a lot of the communities that we're seeing the greatest struggles in terms of mental health was a taboo topic of conversation. If there is a tiny silver lining, it is in being allowed to talk about that, because enough people talk about that, that it doesn't have to be something that you would fear you're the only one who feels that way. And I think that will probably help people. I know I've seen a great evolution in my lifetime of having that not be something that you just don't want anybody to know. It's people need to talk about it. And I think people do talk about it in our organizations, outside of our organizations. It will be helpful for schools to understand it, and maybe part of their new thinking would be to incorporate that more fully into what's important for children to learn and to have access to, kind of like PE. It's been taking a while over time for people to realize, kids need all different kinds of support. And if they don't have the capacity to do that, given that they've got so much on their plate, I really don't want the math teacher to have to focus on that. I would love to have them turn to people like us to, be the resources that they need. We've got so many experts and so much capacity to help with that, and all of us have proven solutions to that, and that would make me feel better about what we've all gone through. If it could turn into a world where not only do young people feel like they have the power to do great things, they also feel like they don't have to be responsible for everything, and they can look at adults once in a while and say, hey, I'm a kid, take care of me, do something for me. Yes, the next generation should build the world, but when I was a kid, we also got to just run around and be kids. And that's the thing I regret most when I see things being taken away from young people. I want people to be active. I want them to engage in their communities, but I'd like them to just tell us what they need and then go play, because that's really what I think adults are supposed to do. And we lose sight of that when we get scared, but that's still our job.
Yeah. And Jim, you get the last word on this, the impact on kids, mental health, physical health, future opportunities.
And again, Jennifer and Stephanie have done a wonderful job framing out, I think, what the issues are going to be and the challenges are going to be. And, I think a couple other thoughts here, and it does ladder into what all is happening right now. One is the inequities in this country are not just racism. It cascades into so many other places, and it's unfair. You think about, we've talked today about high-speed internet devices. It is not equal, and the same group is at a disadvantage when it comes to this. You look at the virus, the COVID-19 coronavirus. It is impacting those of color, blacks, more at a greater level than others, and there's a lot of reasons why. Because the jobs, all of these things that come into play. It's not right. It's just not right. And, I really am appalled and saddened about, this death of George Floyd and all those that came before, because Stephanie's right. It's not new, but at the hands of those that are supposed to protect us. And we have a problem. We have a big problem that has been hidden underneath the crust of this country for way too long. And I hope as we think about our kids, because we're all in the youth business, that we fully embrace the opportunity and obligation, in my mind, to give the information, the education, and to fully equip them so that this generation doesn't repeat what's already been repeated so many times in this country. That's what we're focused on. And yes, the learning loss and the social emotional impact of this, the education loss. You mentioned the last recession. I agree. This will be multiples in terms of devastation on key fundamental human parts of our society, of people. And I believe we all, and starting with me, we have to lean into this with a different level of energy, and on top of it, a different level of effort than we've ever had before. And we're committed, I'm committed to doing whatever it takes along those lines. So, we've denounced what has happened, these actions. And certainly we stand shoulder to shoulder with communities, with neighborhoods, with those of color and Black males and African Americans. We stand at their side because this is not right. So we have a lot of work to do internally and using our voice externally when it comes to the platform that we already have and we're going to use, because things need to change. And I'm proud to be in the organization I'm in, and certainly to have Stephanie, Jennifer, and others that I know feel the same. And we're going to tackle this and not give up and change this trajectory.
So I want to thank you all. This is a very frank and difficult conversation, talking about some really hard stuff. And just, I will say, as someone who knows you and the work that you're all doing, that one of the things that gives me hope for the future is that people like you are in the jobs you're in and have the commitments that you have. So I want to thank you for doing this, but more for doing what you do every day for the youth of America. I look forward to working with you in the future. And thank you all for listening in.